today we are in Dr. Jim Costa's office at the Highlands Biological Station. You are the director of the Biological Station.
Yes.
And you've just published a new book, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And this is the 200th anniversary of Charles Darwin's birth and the 150th anniversary of his famous book, Origin of Species. And that's what yours is an annotated version.
Yes, an annotated edition of the Origin of Species. So yeah, it was time to come out in this dual anniversary year.
Right, it's quite something, 150th and 200th.
Yeah, big milestones.
And it's also a facsimile, is that right? An annotated facsimile?
Yeah, yes. Harvard published Darwin's text as a facsimile of the first edition of the Origin of Species. And they published it in such a way that there was a wide margin, so I have marginal annotations that help the reader along, follow Darwin's arguments.
All right, yeah, I'm actually going to embarrass you and read from the Publishers Weekly. I liked what they said. They said that Costa's thoughtful and informative notes enable readers to gain a much fuller appreciation for Darwin's genius and breadth of knowledge. A fine tribute in the great scientist's bicentennial year. So that was nice.
That was nice, yeah.
Well, maybe we could start with why did you write this book?
Well, the book, if I can use the word evolved here, it evolved over time. It really started as a project with my students. Soon after arriving at Western Carolina University, I began to teach a course on the origin of species, and that involved delving into the book in some detail myself, and I generated a series of notes to help the students along, and that they grew over time. I benefited from a lot of great feedback, give and take with the students, and sharing of ideas. About 5 years ago, I began also teaching the origin in a course offered at Oxford University in the UK through Harvard's summer program, and also benefited then from a lot of give and take with those students. And as the anniversary year approached, my publisher, Harvard, and I realized that this could be a potentially very valuable educational resource. And so I was sort of inspired to formalize the whole process and collect all of my annotations, do some additional background research, and produce this annotated volume. It's really surprising that there wasn't any annotated volume available out there, despite a voluminous literature on Darwin and his works. There just isn't anything quite like this.
So this takes, like, if he refers to a person that he's notating some research they did, you're explaining that more fully? Is that just the sort of thing? In
part, that would be one of the things that I try to do. There are several things that I try to do. Darwin packs a lot of information, natural history observations of various kinds. He constructs arguments. He cites the scientists and others of his day. And so there's a lot to explain to the reader. And so in the running narrative, I try to explain who's who, why they're being cited, what the historical context is of a particular citation or an argument that Darwin is making. And then I flesh out those individuals that are mentioned with a biographical glossary of sorts at the end of the book. And I give a more detailed description of who these people are and what their contributions to the science may have been.
Well, you told me that you felt like the Origin of Species was really valuable because of the way Darwin wrote it as an argument, that it's useful today in a time when we're still arguing about evolution.
Yeah, it's an unusual scientific book, and it's one of the things really that makes it extremely interesting. As literature, as well as a work of science. Darwin was hard at work on what he would have called a proper scientific treatise, which he provisionally was calling Natural Selection. He was about 10 or so chapters into that, and when I say a proper treatise, I mean very densely argued, almost every point buttressed with a multitude of citations, lots of data, many footnotes, giving, recognizing the authorities behind certain claims made or observations made. It would have been an enormous tome. He might have split it into 2 volumes, actually, which was not unusual in that day. But he was compelled through the discovery of this whole process of evolution by natural selection by a then little-known naturalist, Alfred Russel Wallace, compelled to really almost rush into print his work. And so he took his 10-plus chapter project and condensed it enormously. And the product that we know as The Origin of Species is, for that reason, very unusual. He eliminated all of the footnotes. In many cases, he streamlined down to a handful of buttressing observations or arguments. It's written in a much more narrative style, and it may still seem a little dense in places, but it's really very different from your typical scientific treatise of the day. And he was, in fact, painfully aware of that. He's apologetic repeatedly in the book in calling it an abstract. It's really an abstract of his ideas. And my students always get a kick out of that because this is one of the longest abstracts they've ever read, over 430 pages long.
But from a layperson's point of view, does that make it more accessible to someone that isn't a scientist?
Yes, I think it does. It does in that it's not burdened with an enormous number of footnotes, examples that are given. There may be 2 or 3 or 4 buttressing examples or data from certain studies presented, whereas in his original manuscript there might have been 15 or more.
In your introduction, called it some places lyrical, and I wondered if you could maybe point out a passage like that to us.
The ones that I find the most beautifully written are often ones where he's invoking an interesting metaphor of some kind. Darwin, I think, had a real flair for metaphor in trying to get his point across. You see that in some of his earlier writing, like The Voyage of the Beagle, but here in places you see it quite a lot, really put to good use in trying to make a point. And in some cases, it just illuminates the page to me. One example would be his invocation of the tree of life, an ancient metaphor for all of life. And he's trying to express to the reader the idea of the kind of unity of life and the idea that all of life is related as one great family tree. And so he writes, as buds give rise by growth to fresh buds, and these, if vigorous, branch out and overtop on all sides many a feebler branch, so by generation I believe it has been with the great tree of life, which fills it with its dead and broken branches the crust of the earth, and covers the surface with its ever-branching and beautiful ramifications. I think that's quite nice.
That's very nice.